Issue 2 passed on Election Day, making Ohio the 24th state to legalize recreational marijuana. Now, the new law will go into effect in December on the 7th. Spokesperson for Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol is Tom Herron, and he is now here to break down Issue 2 and tell us about those new regulations for recreational marijuana. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Tom, let's get right into it. How will the passing of Issue 2 change laws here in Ohio?
Well, at the outset, it will end the injustice of marijuana prohibition. It will authorize the possession of up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana in plant form or up to 15 grams of marijuana in extract form. It will start to provide Ohio consumers with an alternative to the illicit market and allow them to buy marijuana products from legal, regulated dispensaries that generate new tax revenue to the state of Ohio and our local communities. And it'll ensure that medical patients who for years have not been able to access Ohio's medical marijuana program finally have access to the medical marijuana products that they thought they were getting access to 6 or 7 years ago.
So, Tom, what are the regulations saying about where you can actually use this recreational marijuana?
So think about it just like alcohol. You can't drink a beer walking down the street. The same will apply to marijuana. You're not going to be allowed to consume marijuana in public. Consumption of marijuana will really be governed by, the private property rights of wherever you're located, right? Smoke-free laws that prohibit people from smoking cigarettes indoors at businesses, also prohibit people from smoking marijuana inside those businesses. But, you can certainly use it your private property or private property of others who are open to consumption of marijuana products.
Tom, you and other members of the group involved with Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol were in support of Issue 2. How do you feel the new law will benefit Ohioans?
It's going to have a substantial benefit to Ohioans all across the state. Ohio State University researchers at the Drug Enforcement Policy Center estimate that once implemented, Issue 2 will generate over $400 million every single year in new tax revenue. And that's money that gets directly invested back into our local communities, whether it's through the Host Community Cannabis Fund, which is a fancy way of saying 36% of all of that new tax revenue goes directly back to local governments to use that money to fit the needs of their local communities, whether it's to spend on infrastructure or law enforcement, hiring additional officers or better training for officers, really whatever that community needs, or whether it's the 36% of this new tax revenue that goes into the Social Equity and Jobs Fund that will fund important criminal justice reform efforts and will make direct investments in areas that have been disproportionately impacted by marijuana prohibition to enhance violence prevention, legal aid, youth development, entrepreneurism. So Issue 2 will generate new economic development right back in our local communities throughout the Buckeye State.
Tom, this is, there was Issue 1 and Issue 2. One was put right into the Constitution. What about Issue 2, though? Can lawmakers fool around with the wording, change some laws in regards to Issue 2 now?
Look, we think that Ohio voters have a right to expect that their legislators respect their vote and respect the outcome of elections. Issue 2 passed in a landslide victory, a 14-point margin. It passed in Republican areas. It passed in Democratic areas. It passed in areas with more younger voters, more older voters. Passed in rural areas. It passed in urban areas. So we think it was a mandate from Ohio voters that they expect Issue 2 to be implemented. They don't expect it to be changed. We crafted Issue 2 as an initiated statute so that after it gets implemented, if we need to adjust regulations or as the industry develops and we want to expand what's permitted, that we have the ability to do that. But the expectation of the 2.2 million voters who voted yes on Issue 2 should be that our policymakers and our elected officials implement the will of the voters and don't frustrate the will of the voters.
All right, Tom, thanks very much for joining us today. Big changes on the way for the state of Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.